Greetings, friends. I'm Pastor Carla Christopher. I'm the assistant to the bishop in charge of justice ministries for Lower Susquehanna Synod, or Central Pennsylvania region, and Delaware, Maryland Synod. Those are both part of the ELCA, or the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. I'm also the pastor of Heidelberg United Church of Christ, an open and affirming congregation in downtown York City, Pennsylvania. Before I entered the ministry, though, I was a diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, or DEIB, consultant and trainer, working with nonprofits, academic institutions, school systems, and library systems. I'm very familiar with the best practices and the challenges that can come from having conversations around justice and equity, particularly in one of the most divided times I know I've seen in my lifetime. I'm here today because that is the most frequent question that I get. As much as we'd love to dive into learning and advocacy and all of the things we can do to help heal the world and bring about beloved community as people of faith, there are a few steps that can really help and support us in creating healthy, relevant, reverent, and authentic spaces to have healthy, helpful conversations around issues of diversity, equity, inclusion, and creating true belonging for all God's people. So how do we have these conversations? Folks are divided across lines, civically, politically, ideologically, theologically. There are some things we can do to help. In fact, there are 3 in particular I'd love to share with you today. One is scene setting, how we create the space, how we hold the space before the conversation even begins. The second is history and common language. Too often, disagreements do occur from misunderstanding or because people have a different expectation or a different sense of meaning around some of the words and phrases that commonly cause discord in groups trying to have helpful engagement. The third is tactics. How are we approaching our learning and our advocacy or just our conversation? So let's go back to scene setting. I love my trinities. So from these 3 tips, each one has 3 steps. I introduced myself using my name and my work location as relevant to a training or a diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging conversation. But if I was actually in the space, I would use a best practice introduction. So let's try again. Hi, I'm Carla Christopher. My preferred name is Carla. My pronouns are she, her, hers, or they, them, theirs. I live and work on the unceded land of the Susquehannock. I'm a multicultural Black woman for the visually impaired with short curly hair and medium complexion. And also, I do have attention deficit disorder, and as an accommodation, I may get up and move around, or I may be fidgeting with my hands. It doesn't require any external support or engagement from the community. It's just something to be aware of in case you find it distracting. Please feel free to let me know, or I will not be offended if you move to a different space if you're next to me. So what does this best practice introduction do? Well, it's inclusive, making it very, very obvious to anyone participating that while we all come from different spaces, there are many types of diversity, and we are here to recognize each individual as a whole person. You can bring your accommodation needs or any barriers to full participation into the space, and they will be recognized and supported. Also, we affirm gender diversity and recognize the importance of preferred names as well as the identities that individuals bring to the dialogue. We also recognize that even as we engage in our current context, there is a great deal of history that we all wrestle with, in which pretty much all of us are involved in some way, shape, or form. If we are non-Indigenous and on American land, we're part of a complicated system of justice and oppression already. So grounding ourselves in the remembrance of that knowledge can be a healthy humbling at the beginning of a conversation. It also is because that was requested by individuals from those communities. Our LGBTQIA+ siblings have indicated that use of pronouns is very important. Our Indigenous siblings have asked that land acknowledgements be part of gatherings and an affirmation, a recognition that this land has far more ancient stewards than colonial settlers. Also, people from different ability communities have said having a chance to name and to seek accommodation for particular needs is very helpful. So by following those instructions, honoring those asks, it lets individuals know that we're not just here for our own perspectives and opinions. We do respond and care about what the actual affected people have said they needed or wanted. Also, it's important to choose a safe space to gather. For individuals from the LGBTQIA+ community, churches can be incredibly triggering spaces where active oppression occurred. So it can be better to meet in a coffee shop, a bookstore, a neutral space that doesn't have trauma triggers or memories of harm from previous time. Finally, community agreements. Before any dialogue begins, the group should all agree on the rules of engagement, so to speak. Some of my favorite suggestions are confidentiality, what we talk about here stays here. Assume good intentions. If someone says something that doesn't feel quite right, instead of assuming that they're deliberately being antagonistic or aggressive, if I assume good intentions, I have the space to say, ouch, that stung a little bit. I'd love to ask for some more information. Can you clarify that for me? Can we unpack that for a bit before moving on? I can really help with healthy dialogues. Another is step up, step back. This challenges individuals. If you've been pretty quiet and haven't been sharing your wisdom, your experience, or your opinion, can you challenge yourself to contribute more actively to the conversation? And also, if your voice has been dominating the space, if there's others who have not yet had a chance to share and you've cut individuals off or spoken repeatedly, can you mindfully take a back seat and make sure that other voices have room in the space? Whatever the community agreements, and there are many suggested sets and ideas that are easily available if you just Google the term community agreements. You can have plenty of suggestions, but it's always helpful to take a moment to allow the group to come up with their own. So again, a quick review. First, big tip for healthy conversations around oppression and justice issues: scene setting. Using introductions that declare the space intentional, that recognize and affirm multiple cultures and cultural realities, where we get to know each other before we even begin a dialogue, find commonalities, have a chance to ask questions, maybe engage in practices that aren't familiar to us, that can let us be in a little bit more open-minded and humble mindset. Also, choosing safer spaces, more helpful spaces where everyone feels there are not barriers to their active participation, whether those barriers are physical and safety barriers or mental, emotional, and spiritual barriers. And also setting up community agreements that everyone agrees to before the conversation begins.